Yeah, all set. Well, Jeff Kripal said he was nervous standing under Jesus here, and he's a chair of a religion department. Just think about me. After this talk, I've got to go home and get ready for a shul tonight, go daven at Shabbos. So, anyway, well, thank you. I'm Jeff Levin. I'm on the faculty here at Baylor. And unlike so many other people at this conference, I'm actually a biomedical scientist who studies religion. Most of my work over the last 30 years has been epidemiologic research, empirical public health research on religion and spirituality and faith and things like that. But alongside of that work, parallel to that work, I've had an interest in healing, in energy healing, esoteric healing. A lot of that is because I'm from a multi-generational family of healers. I myself have been trained in a variety of different modalities, including Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. I've also trained in bioenergetics and therapeutic touch and a variety of other modalities. What I want to present here today are some reflections that I've made on the topic of energy healers, who they are, what it is that they do, based on about 30 years of involvement in this field and having, by knowledge, just read about everything in the English language or in translation in English on the topic. This particular talk, think of it as kind of an abbreviation or prolegomenon of a lengthier work, paper I published in peer-reviewed medical journal several years ago, journal published by Dean Radin called Explore. You want a lengthier version of what I have to say, you can find it there. I published a series of papers in that journal over the last several years on the topic of healers and healing. All right, we are going to do three things here. I'd like to present some reflections on who healers are. And I've developed over the last few years a taxonomy of people who call themselves energy healers. Next thing we'll tackle is, are there any core concepts among energy healers? Among the diversity of people who call themselves energy healers, is there something in common regarding their beliefs or their practices? And then finally, what really matters for healing? If not the beliefs or practices, what is it that healers in their own words say matters? There really are two sets of questions that one could focus on in exploring this topic. One is what I would call kind of the how and why question. And certainly over the last 15, 20 years within biomedicine, the idea of healing or energy healing or faith healing or prayer and healing is very, very controversial. And what I would call the how and why of this has occupied many, many people. There have been conferences, there have been books, there have been papers, there have been rejoinders published in places like JAMA. This talk will not focus on the how or why. That really is probably best left to a medical or scientific conference. What I want to focus on is the who and the what. Who are these folks? Who do they say that they are? What is it that they say that they do? And just kind of punt on the how or why or the mechanism question. So the first thing, taxonomy. Well, as a kind of preface, this word healing. What does the word healing mean? Within my field, within public health and medicine, we hear the word all the time, and strangely, there's not a consensus definition on what the word healing means. In some instances, it's used as a kind of a word regarding a word describing an intervention. There are people who do healing. It's something that people do, like therapeutic touch or Reiki. It's something that a client, that a practitioner delivers to a client. It's a thing. It's an intervention, a therapy. In other studies and other contexts, healing is used as an outcome, kind of equivalent to curing or restoring as a result of medical therapy or alternative therapy or psychotherapy or whatever. We hope to be healed. So this is a very different context. And then finally, some biomedical scientists use healing as a synonym for salutogenesis, the healing process. So the process of getting well, healing, as opposed to the process of getting sick, pathogenesis. Now, what's the real definition of the word healing? I don't know. You know, a word is whatever people decide that it means. And I have studied and have written papers on the topic of healing in all three of these contexts, but for the purposes of this morning, we're going to be focusing on the first context, healing as an intervention. I'm making no claims that what happens actually causes people to get better or tumors to shrink or anything like that. Again, that's probably a topic for another discussion. But what we're going to try to do today is identify who these people are that call themselves healers. Well, from my reading, I've identified 4 distinct traditions of energy healers, of people who call themselves energy healers. I've identified what I call an East Asian tradition, a Western professional tradition, mostly nurses, a tradition of people who practice what they call bioenergy or bioenergetic or bioenergical healing, and then kind of a grab bag that I've just, for convenience, labeled a contemporary metaphysical tradition, kind of one-off New Age healers and esoteric healers of one sort or another. What's interesting about this is that these groups of people seem to language what they do. If they have anything in common, they seem to language what they do a little bit differently and with a distinctive set of religious correlates. So this East Asian tradition, this would be things like Reiki and Qigong and Makari and Amashiatsu. If you read through people who practice one of these types of healing, what they do is typically languaged in terms of the principles of traditional Chinese medicine. So you'll see a lot on qi and on meridians. Some of this work is based on Buddhist teachings, some's based on Taoism, some secular, some is contexted in terms of an actual subtle energy, some's not. A minority of these types of traditions reference the Ayurvedic tradition, chakras, and prana as opposed to qi and meridians, but most of them tend to have TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, as a lingua franca. The Western professional tradition, these would be things like therapeutic touch and healing touch, which evolved out of therapeutic touch. Therapeutic touch was developed by several people about 40 years ago, including former president of the Theosophical Society, and it's, as I say in my slide, it's kind of a modernized, scientificized, if that's a word, version of laying on of hands. And healing touch evolved out of that. Interestingly, in Houston at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center School of Nursing, there are some folks there who study healing touch. It's probably the center globally for scientific research on healing touch. It's a nursing school at UT in Houston. Again, as I remarked, this type of work is very prominent in the nursing profession. There's considerably more empirical research on these modalities than on the East, at least in the West, than on the East Asian traditions. And it has been subject to considerable pushback and controversy, especially in the medical community. There have been really slanderous pieces written about nurses who practice healing and therapeutic touch. It's a famous story a friend of mine tells, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but a hospital in Great Britain that finally the chief of the medical staff, all the nurses were doing healing, had to make an announcement. He said, from now on, there will be no more healing at this hospital. And I personally, and I haven't seen an attitudinal study that proves this, but I think a lot of the resistance is probably very gendered. I think there's probably, man-woman stuff going on, doctor-nurse stuff going on. I think the fact that a lot of healing touch and therapeutic touch, but especially healing touch, is going on in modern medical centers, and it's being done by women, and it's very humanistic in its outlook, I think meets with some pushback. And the fact that there is a growing evidence base to this work, I think, is also very threatening to allopathic physicians. Just my impression. A third tradition, what I'm calling a bioenergy tradition. This is a very different tradition of healing, goes by various names, and I just list some of them here: bioenergetics, bioenergotherapy, biotronics, bioenergy, so forth. Definitely the most prominent practitioner of the bioenergy domain of energy healing in the West is Miyatak Warkus, whose office is up in Bethesda, Maryland. He is probably the most well-known, he has trained the most people, and he is the most scientifically vetted. The U.S. Army has studied him, as well as, so I'm told, the intelligence agencies, United States. I'm not supposed to know that, but it's true. The bioenergy tradition, unlike the East Asian tradition, like Qigong and Reiki, and unlike the therapeutic touch tradition, originated in Russia and Eastern Europe, although there is a myth of origin that locates a Tibetan source for a lot of these teachings. The reference here, instead of to qi, as in traditional Chinese medicine, or prana, as in Ayurveda, is to bioenergo. And I find when I read the works of bioenergy healers, there's a lot more kind of physical sciencey stuff. Lots of talk of biophysics and biochemical components and psychoenergetics. There's also a kind of heavy Catholic and Orthodox Christian element to the way things are languaged, crossed with a very male, masculine, and a very left-brain scientific languaging and approach that's very different from the Western professional tradition, which are mainly a tradition that came out of nursing and came out of theosophy, and then also very different from the East Asian tradition, which evolved out of Buddhism and Taoism and other traditions, and it's just languaged differently. Then finally, the last group, it's just kind of a grab bag, but within this group there are things in common. The examples I use are that I'm sure a lot of us have heard of Barbara Brennan, Donna Eden, Rosalind Briere. Unlike the other three traditions that I've just outlined, I think the lingua franca here is the language of esotericism. And a lot of these traditions, as I say here, are sui generis. There's not a lot in common, but they share if there is a commonality here, they share a reliance on channeled sources of information that come often from discarnate sources or from other sources. The healer, in the course of doing the healing, there's explicitly interaction with non-human consciousnesses, and there is oftentimes assistance from spirit guides or angels or ascended masters or members of the Great White Brotherhood or the hierarchy or Lord Sananda or whomever. These are all kind of their own thing. Oftentimes you find a particular healer that got a revelation or channeled something or had an experience, entered a state of consciousness and brought something through and brought through a very unique type of system of healing. But again, and I think folks at this conference would understand the way a lot of this is languaged. A lot of concepts from the esoteric traditions, astral planes and causal planes and the seven rays and the whole bit, which is a very different languaging than the other traditions. And then a subset of these kinds of folks that have been involved in spiritual healing. Now, I'm not saying that all people that do, quote, spiritual or faith healing are energy healers, but a subset of people that call themselves spiritual healers language what they do in terms of some type of an energy, as opposed to explicitly saying they do faith healing or that God heals ex nihilo. And another example, this might be John of God, who is certainly a spiritual healer, faith healer, but kind of outside of the mainstream Western Christian faith healing tradition, and certainly operates very similarly to some of these other folks. I've given versions of this talk to the Brazilian Spiritists, both in D.C. and in Paris a couple years ago, and as you can imagine, there's tremendous interest in John of God there. And I've seen some videotapes, I've seen some things written, but I don't know if there have been any type of evidence-based studies on his work, but that'd be very fascinating. Okay, so this all begs the question here, and maybe there should be a question mark. Are there core concepts in energy healing? Across all these different types of healers, are there any beliefs or techniques or practices that these folks share in common? I can think of 5 variables here, 5 questions that we're going to pose, and see if there are any universals. And I'm going to just cut to the chase and say, to the best of my knowledge, the answer is no. And I don't know if people think of that, but first question, what's the source of healing and the pathway of transmission to the client? So this energy or whatever it is that it is, where does it come from and how does it get to the client? This is a selection of some of the healers that I've talked to or that I've read, and they're all over the map. The healer has no power of his own. The healers channel energies outside themselves with the assistance of sentient beings. All healing, without exception, according to Janet Quinn, is self-healing. Healers impart healing, but should teach clients to heal themselves, and so on. So we have all kinds of different opinions here about the source of healing and what it is that gets transmitted. What is it that's being transmitted or channeled or worked on? Is it energy? Is it, whatever? Rosalind Briere says it's an electromagnetic force, flow of currents. Bill Collins involves the energy heal. Cook says it's not energy at all. It's just thought. It's consciousness. Someone else says, well, it's suggestion. Israel Regardi said it was the healer's awakened spiritual centers. The healer's own awakened chakras impact on the client by way of some sort of sympathetic magic. Someone else said it's about awareness. So again, not much in common. What do healers actually do when they perform healing? Larry LaShawn said they enter a state of consciousness and go about their business. Someone else said that any healing that takes place is wholly within the mind of the practitioner. The clients out there are just sitting there, laying there. Other people say that it's not just in the healer's mind. They're actually going through a ritual of spinning the chakras of the client, helping the energies become more coherent, and so on. And what about the state of consciousness required of the healer in order to conduct healing? Norm Shealy said that the healer needs to have a life of prayer and devotion and so on, and consciousness, so that they can tap into this divine energy. Swami Panchadasi says it's all about just, in the moment, having strong affirmations, strong pictures. Swami Atreya said, no, just have a neutral mind. Just kind of, be still and know that I'm God and clear everything out. Leslie Carmack, it's all about dispassion and detachment. Another healer says anybody can be a channel of healing provided they keep their own will out of the way. So it's really not about what the healer does at all. It's just about kind of clearing out and allowing something to come through. Goldsmith said just spontaneous, no affirmations at all. So again, all over the map. And then finally, what's required of the client in order to receive a healing? Okay? The client is fully responsible. The client should just simply keep focused on their breath. If the client doesn't want to be healed, the healer's job is impossible, but other folks say that actually, look at the bottom, from Dora Coons, the attitude of the patient regarding healing doesn't affect its efficacy at all. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. The healer's going to do their thing. The patient's just a blank slate. Other people, the healer's a blank slate. It's all in the patient. Other people, it's, whatever. So what are our take-home points on all of this? These. Universal core beliefs about energy healing are hard to identify. Some healers, even the belief in the healing power of a life energy, which one would think is universal, some healers affirm that, some don't. And then there's tremendous diversity in approach. There's touch healing. Okay, there's proximal or non-contact healing, meaning kind of just off the skin. That's how a lot of Reiki healers work. That's kind of how I work. Then there's distant or absent healing, distant chi, external chi. There are different assessment or diagnostic techniques. Some people access quote-unquote higher guidance. Some folks don't. And even within particular traditions, within Reiki, within Qigong, within therapeutic touch, within et cetera, there's a lot of diversity. My experience knowing a lot of these folks and being an end user, being a client of a lot of these folks, is that I don't want to say most are eclectic because I haven't met most healers, but most of the healers I've met are eclectic. And even if they're trained in one tradition, they also know something else or work something else in. A lot of people that call themselves energy healers also are body workers, just as a lot of people who are body workers also do energy healing and don't really distinguish. And again, all of this language that I've come up with, typical academic, we've got to chop it all up and give it names. But most people, they just do healing. This is a quote from my friend Dan Benor, who probably knows more about the research on this topic than anyone. Where's the key? Basically, what he's saying is that any person may heal, and what really matters isn't so much the technique, but that there are other things involved, something intrinsic to the person. So, last question, last thing I'll deal with: what really matters for healing? If there aren't universal core beliefs or techniques or practices of all people who call themselves energy healers, what matters? What is it that we can say? What is it that matters for healing? Because clearly it's not a particular technique, it's not a particular belief, it's not a particular system or worldview or whatever. So what is it that matters? So and again, this isn't based on empirical study, it's based on just talking to these folks. What do they say matters? Well, here's some interesting quotes from Barbara Brennan, a famous healer, Jerry Sulfin, who's a researcher who's studied healers, Norm Shealy, a friend, a Duke-trained neurosurgeon who founded the American Holistic Medical Association. Barbara Brennan talks about states of being. Jerry Sullivan talks about the healing relationship. And Norm talked about elements of personality. So it's not really particular beliefs or particular practices. It's something else. So what can we say about this? Three things that come to mind are these: focus, compassion, and intention. And I'll show you some sites here. But as we go through what healers have said in their own words, through their own writings, these are the things that seem to matter. And I just want to say that these ideas, this is not original with me. A lot of what I have to say here in this slide is owed to the insights of a number of very gifted energy healers that I've known and I've worked with as a client and as a friend and a colleague, one of whom is Leslie Carmack, who is a tremendously gifted clairvoyant healer I've known for many years. Another is Laura Mead, lives in Kansas, who's a bioenergetics practitioner. In fact, is one of Mietek Workus's consigliaries, if I can use that word, a master of that tradition. And they really got me thinking about this idea of focus, compassion, and intention. And notice that these correspond to the three psychological functions, kind of cognition, affect, and behavior intention. So here's some quotes on focus. For effective healing, clarify your thoughts, strong desire, concentration, compassion. It's about unconditional love. The Ogle Worrell and Ambrose Worrell said we have to care, we have to have real compassion, love, harmony, purity, rhythm, intention. It's the intent of the healer. It's not a particular belief or technique, but it's just an intention, a clear intention. And healing, Karen Harris on the last one, healing intention is everything. Karen, no one here would have heard of. Karen was my Reiki sensei, and intention is everything. So the take-home point on all of this. What really makes for successful healers? Attaining a single-pointed, relaxed focus, exhibiting an open heart, compassion, non-personal loving kindness, affirming the intention to help people. And most healers I'll go farther than that, almost all healers I've ever talked to or that I've read about think that this is best nurtured through daily meditation or some sort of a spiritual practice that includes introspection or a prayer life or something that involves going inward and getting focused and getting balanced. So, last thing here, conclusions. Energy healers are heterogeneous. There's all kinds, there's all types, there's different historical categories or lineages. There are few, if any, core principles of theory or practice that are common to all of them. The beliefs and techniques are very diverse. What seems to matter are not ideology or technique, but whatever intrinsically in one's heart or spirit or soul motivates the healer to do that work, and the dynamics of the relationship between the healer and client. Now, I'm not saying that technique doesn't matter. I think technique matters. You can be good or bad. You can learn something, or you can just go about it half-assed. But it's not that technique doesn't matter, but the particular technique that you train in, personally, I don't think matters at all. As long as it's a horrible quote. What's the thing that General Eisenhower once said? He didn't care what a man's religion is as long as he had one. That's a problematic quotation, but I mean, when it comes to energy healing, I don't think it really matters what tradition or system you're involved in. If you've done the inner work and are prepared and have requisite skills in some sort of a system, I think you can be an energy healer. I don't really need to go into much of this. I am a scientist. I think there's all kinds of exciting ways that we could explore this work from a scientific perspective, especially this idea of focus and compassion and intention. There are all kinds of studies of clinical efficacy and behavioral and patient education studies that can be done. I'm very interested in some of the work on biomedical markers that's looked at healers, and there have been studies of the brainwave patterns of people healing and undergoing healing, but not a lot. And as an epidemiologist, I would be really excited about doing some sort of long-term national or global survey of people that receive healing or people practice healing, and look at what happens. Look at what results over time. But unless somebody is here and with a check for $500,000, that's probably not on the agenda anytime soon. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.